Hi, it's Ed Oakley of Enlightened Leadership Solutions, and back with you with the third video in this series of change and leadership management. And I want to apologize. I hope you don't mind that the sort of lack of solid professionalism we're using here, using flip charts, things of that nature. But to be honest with you, I think you'd rather us be putting our time and energy into having an outstanding course for you coming up in the webinar series. So anyway, if you remember the 7 steps to successful change initiatives, then step 2 of that was to determine which of the 3 primary organizational systems, strategy, structure, or behavior, is the greatest constraint, and then plan to deal with that first. So let's talk about what we mean by constraint. You may be familiar with the work of Ellie Goldratt. Part of his work is the theory of constraints. Now let's look at just a really simple example and you'll readily understand what he's talking about. Let's say we got a heavy steel chain and we hook that between 2 big trucks and we pull that chain and eventually something's going to give. A link is going to break. So the strength of that chain is constrained by the strength of the weakest link. Right? We've heard that so many times. And if you fix that link now, and you make that now more solid and stronger, and you do this same thing again, the chain's going to break somewhere else. That's now going to be the weakest link. So that first one was the biggest constraint to the strength of that system, if you will. Well, what we need to know is what is the biggest constraint to our system, and our system being the primary organizational systems, which are strategy, structure, and behavior. But before we look at how to actually determine the constraint piece, let's talk about strategy a little bit. It's the one that often has some confusion, maybe a bit lack of clarity as to what it means. When we're talking about strategy, we're talking about where we're going and the component of how we're going to get there. It's a roadmap, if you will. And one of the things about strategy is it's not made in concrete. It's not. It's got to have the ability to adapt because we're creating our strategy based on certain assumptions. Now, when we test those assumptions in the real world, we may find that they're incorrect. Well, then we got to change the strategy. Let me give you an example. In fact, speaking of roadmaps, let's use one that uses roadmap. When we come down, we live in Colorado and like to go skiing and also up in the mountains in the summer at times. And when we come down on a Sunday afternoon, you can imagine the traffic is pretty bad. Excuse me, on I-70 coming from the mountains into Denver. Well, the strategy is to get home as quickly as possible and safe while being safe. So, well, okay, how do you accomplish that strategy? The assumption is that I-70, being the biggest, widest, fastest highway, will be the best way to go. And so sure enough, we will take off on I-70 heading down the mountain to Denver. Well, what happens if our assumption is wrong? It's very possible that there is an accident somewhere up ahead and there is nothing. Interstate 70 is nothing but a parking lot. It happens more than we like to talk about. And so our assumption was wrong in that case. You see that? So we've got to change the strategy. Now, the overall strategy of getting home as quickly as possible and while being safe is still good, but the how-to is no longer good. So what we do, if we are realizing by the time we get to Georgetown that the traffic is stopped ahead, and you can see like 2 miles ahead on the stretch of Interstate 70. Then what do? We change our assumption now. The new assumption is the side roads are better and faster. So we'll pull off on the side roads and we'll go cruising along, not very fast, 30, 40 miles an hour maybe, looking up, though, at I-70, which is a parking lot. So at the tourists, by the way, who don't know the side trips, the side roads. Yeah. So you have to adjust the strategy when your assumptions are proven to be incorrect. So other than that, I just want to point out the structure is the systems, the processes, the procedures we use, And the key is to have the systems in alignment with the strategy. Likewise, the people, the behavioral side, having that in alignment with what we're trying to accomplish and how we're trying to accomplish with the strategy. Now, when we're dealing with a major change, one or two or all three of these major systems may very well be affected. Okay. So, but one thing is for sure, you can't deal with all of them realistically at the same time. If you do, it becomes way too complex. We've got to simplify this whole change management, this change leadership initiative. So what we want to do is do our best job of coming up with what's the biggest constraint in the system? What's the biggest issue that if we fix that would allow the system to move forward faster than anything else? Then we can drop back and work on one of the other systems. So we've got a little tool for helping you do that. It's not perfect, but it allows you to have a good conversation about it with the people, the key people who are involved with the change that you're talking about. So, and you can get this, you can download this as a handout, if you will, on the same page. So just look for the handout. So here are the kinds of questions that we have on this. And this is just one of a couple of workbooks we're working on for the webinar series. And so I'm pulling this right out of one of the workbooks. So strategy. Here are the kind of questions you want to talk about or discuss. How clear is the goal or objective? How clear is the approach to achieving the goal or objective? Has the direction or directives changed so that it requires us to redefine our goals and objectives and approach? Are the assumptions you're making for the goal and the approach to achieve that goal proven, or do they need to be tested? I think you'll agree those are really good questions. Now let's move to the structure side. The structure side, we suggest questions like these. Does the current organizational structure support the strategy? Do the systems that are currently in place support the goal or objective? Do current policies and procedures motivate the right behavior? Key piece. And how do you or how will you measure progress and success? That would be a systems piece or structural piece. All right, let's move to the behavior. Is everyone clear on the goal or objective? Do people clearly understand what is expected of them? Are people aligned and committed to a common mission? In what phase of transition are your people? Can people link their efforts to successful organization strategies and results? Where are people generally focused? On the goal or on the problems? Are people on your team proactive or reactive? So use those tools to have a conversation. Again, it may not be perfect, but have a conversation and make a decision which one you think is the greatest constraint. And then go with that one, work on that, resolve that constraint, then come back to these questions to see what the next biggest constraint is and work on that one. By simplifying, looking at the primary organizational systems one at a time, it'll make a huge difference in your ability to really affect the change in a meaningful and effective and a timely way. This is Ed Oakley. I've been enjoying being with you again, and if you have not already, sign up your name and email address over here so you'll be sure to get the next videos. Thank you.